So today is a great day for me. Today I'm joined by Griffith, an author and thought leader whose work has influenced how professionals understand project management and agile thinking. Mike is the author of PMI ACP exam prep. Now it is in the latest edition. I got mine few days back, and he's the creator of PMP Illustrated. I have that first edition. I loved it. It's a visual approach. PMP Illustrated, a visual approach. I'm a visual reader, so I love it to explaining complex professional concepts. Like especially he used animals to explain team management conflict. Just amazing book. His work is known for helping practitioners move beyond memorization and into clear understanding, especially where complexities, mindset, and learning design intersect. Today, conversation is not about training or exam preparation straightforward. Instead, my goal here will be exploring authorship, learning, visual learning, how professionals can better engage with complex idea in evolving work. Mike, thank you for joining me. And as I was sharing, when I did my PMI SAP like 10 years back, it was your book. We all remember like the green book. My teacher said that get that green book. It's Mike, and you can easily buy it. Get that book, read that book 3 times, and you will pass the exam. First of all, thank you for helping us to pass PMI SCP exam. Mike, can you share us about this new book? How basically what made you change in that PMI ACP exam prep? It was already one of the best book in the market, and you just released that new edition. So how that edition differentiate from the previous edition, and why should people who are preparing for the PMI ACP exam when they should start using that book? And whatever you can share, please go ahead. Thank you, Manish.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'm glad that I was able to help you out all the way back then with probably the first edition of my book 10 years ago. And so, yes, there is a new version came out this year. And the reason why it changed, it's to reflect the changes in the exam itself. So PMI updated the ACP exam content outline. So that's really the blueprint that explains what the exam topics will be for participants. So in November of 2024, so just over a year ago, they released a new exam content outline, or ECO. And in that, they'd changed the knowledge areas, the domains that they call them, that the exam is based on. So that tells you how many questions you're going to get and on what topics. And they went from 7 domains down to 4. So they kind of simplified the domains, but they didn't remove any content. They just sort of consolidated and moved things around. But there were some new topics added. And of course, I needed to update my book to reflect these exam changes. So it's still a green book. It's just a slightly kind of different shade of green now. So it's still the green book, I guess. And it's aligned to that exam change. And the reason why the exams change, and it's about every 4 years, I think they were a bit overdue on the last update, is that they want them to remain current, right? So PMI does a number of surveys and questionnaires with practitioners. One of them is called a JTA, or job task analysis. And they actually interview Agile practitioners, and they ask them, hey, which of these techniques do you actually use on a day-to-day basis? Are you still doing stand-ups and retros? Are you using more perhaps scaling approaches now? What about psychological safety? What about remote teams? So they survey practitioners, and they also survey hiring managers to say, hey, if you're recruiting into a company a new Scrum Master or Agile coach, what qualities or attributes do you look for, and what tasks do you expect them to be able to do when they hit the ground, on day 1 or in the first week or whatever? So that's what makes, I think, PMI's credentials both a bit harder than perhaps some of the other credentials that are out there, especially in the Agile space, but also valuable for hiring managers because they have this sort of rigor around questionnaires and making sure that they're current. And so, yeah, that November 2024 update made a bunch of changes. So we added scaling approaches in there. So you're now expected to know about SAFe and LESS and Nexus and DA and different approaches that organizations may be using in larger structures. They added things like more coverage of psychological safety. So we talk about the 4 stages of psychological safety, from that inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and challenging the status quo. So good stuff that was kind of agile adjacent. So may not be sort of baked into Scrum or XP, but we find that practitioners use these techniques, or it's good for any kind of knowledge worker to understand, especially if you're in a leadership role, how do you create that psychological safety on your team? So that was a new topic that was introduced, along with some other agile adjacent techniques like lean startup and design thinking that often are overlaid or intermingled with sort of the normal or plain vanilla agile approaches. And so, yeah, the exam changed both in the structure, the domains, and the tasks, as well as in the content. So we've had scaling, we had psychological safety, we've got lean startup, like I mentioned, design thinking, the use of AI, of course, now in projects. And so it was time to update the exam, and therefore I had to update my book. So that's what I did. And yes, we got the new topics in there, but it's always an opportunity to reflect back some of the feedback we gather as well. So readers are encouraged to send in any tips or improvements, and I always apply those when we update the book. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so that's the reason, I guess, why it changed and why there's a new book that's out there.
Okay. Mike, now looking at ACP, I always have a lot of questions when people do PMP, and we'll come back to PMP also and the
Yeah.
changes into that. You are certified PMP. You are living in US, Canada, or Gulf countries. Why do you need PMI ACP? This
Yeah, that's
question,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Especially now that in 2021, the PMP exam was broadened to include agile approaches. Agile and hybrid, right, are tested in the current PMP exam. And in fact, they make up 50% of the questions are agile and hybrid currently. There's a change coming next year we can talk about. But if agile is in the PMP, why should I care about an ACP, right? And the way I describe it is that the PMP is like a mile wide, inch deep view of all different approaches. You have to understand predictive, you have to understand agile, you have to understand hybrid. And because it covers such a broad sort of breadth, it can't go very deep in any of them. So you have to understand the what and the why. So we need to understand that, a sprint is a time boxed iteration to do work in. We need to understand that we have retrospectives to improve process and product and get suggestions from the team. But it can't go into the how. It's not a specialization in Agile. And that's where the ACP, I think, distinguishes itself. It's the PMP is you are a well-rounded project manager, or at least it's a driver's license, right? You should know the basics to get going. And then it's up to the hiring manager to, ask good questions to see if they really are a good project manager. But if you want to demonstrate expertise or specialization in agile approaches, that's why you would care about getting an ACP. It's to, show that you not only understand what a retrospective is and why we would want to do one, but the how. It goes into the how, right? So we would go through setting the stage, and we would go through understanding and testing security, and are people willing to sort of contribute without fear of reprisal. So that is not tested in the PMP. You won't get questions about the stages of running or how to run a retrospective, But in the ACP, you may well, right? There are questions about how do you, or this has gone wrong in a retro, what would you do next? Or which is the best option? And so, yeah, great question. Yes, Agile is in the PMP, but at a high level, right? ACP is your specialization, much like we have the RMP, the risk management professional, to show that specialization in risk management. You have your ACP to show that specialization in agile approaches.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And this, I'm gonna clip this, and whenever someone asks, I'm gonna say, "Hey, this guy made the PMI SCP exam." I look at his answer and what he is saying, and I actually put that into a context whenever Sudha just give PMI SCP exam last week. She cleared it and she read your book, and she had the same insight. I said, "What do you think?" And she answered the same thing between PMP and ACP. That is the biggest difference. You have to go into depth of agile,
Right.
and with the new exam you actually learned more how things work into that. I have a very important question, and three students have asked it. Now, whenever we talk about agile, it is often described as a mindset, but
Mhm.
many professionals still experience it as a checklist or framework. Like you talked about retrospective, step one, step two, step three, there are
Yeah.
five steps, you do this. So where do you think that disconnect comes from?
Yeah, I'm of the, I believe it's a mindset and set of values as well, right? That we have to believe that the best way to get, the results we want from our team is to listen to them, to empower them, to let them figure out and solve, what is the most practical next step. So I'm all about the empowerment, the iteration, the feedback, let's try something and learn from that. And when I describe it in my book, I talk about left to right agile adoption. In other words, you start with the mindset and the values and the principles, and then that's manifested through many, many practices. You could choose to do a daily stand up. You could choose to do, all these different approaches. Now, often when organizations decide to go agile or use agile, they see all these visible practices on the kind of on the right hand side, and they say, okay, we're going to go agile. That means 2 week sprints. We're going to have a backlog, and we're going to do retros every 2 weeks, right? So they've leapt to the visible checklist practices without perhaps understanding that, well, we need to listen to the team because they're the experts in the domain, right? And if we don't get their buy-in, well, they aren't really going to execute very well with much commitment. So, the criticism, and we could talk about cargo cult agile, is when you do things because you don't really understand why, right? The purpose of having a retrospective isn't so we can ask what went well, what didn't go well, and what should we do next week. It's to actually empower the team and show them that they actually have the capability of designing a new experiment. And if it's successful, we're going to change our entire way of working, right? So it becomes a checklist if you don't understand why you're doing these things. And I don't really care how long you make your sprints or iterations. And I don't care if you call it a sprint or an iteration, or if you invent a different name for your organization because it makes more sense. But I do care that we deliver things frequently and that we check back with our customers, sponsors, and team members to say, hey, are we moving in the right direction? Is there anything we need to change? Where is the next best dollar spent? Um, so those things that I do care about, but the words, the names, and things that I don't think are as important. So I guess, yeah, I'm a more mindset values person as opposed to a checklist type of person.
Yeah, I really like it. The entire thing that you just shared. You just talked about the delivery has to be increment so that we can just deliver MVP and get the customer feedback immediately. Whatever you talk about, as long as you are giving them delivery immediately, they can
Yes,
have a piece of a pie. They can give the feedback, are we in the right direction or not? They feel their money is being well spent. That's agile,
right.
right? Okay, now in your vast career, you have seen agile applied across industries and culture. What part of agile thinking you believe are truly universal? regardless of the context, and which good organization uses, and the organization which could not succeed, they miss the point.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate that the organizations I've worked with, I think because I was a consultant for so long, I kind of get called in and say, hey, we're interested in Agile, but we're in a highly regulated pharmaceutical environment. We're not sure if it's suitable for us. Can you help us out? I work with a pharmaceutical company because they were FDA regulated and they had this big, long sort of certification process on the back end, and they wanted to perhaps chop it up and do that throughout and make it all iterative. Um, so I think a lot of my experience, because I've been invited in, they already buy into the mindset, which is perhaps the biggest obstacle, right? So I've not worked with many organizations that didn't see the benefit of empowering their teams, working in small batches, learning, updating as we go. I've been successful. That pharmaceutical one was interesting because in the end, we determined that no, you can't actually pull the FDA certification and regulation component of drug certification and do it iteratively because it has to be repeated when you finish your formulation. Right? For the safety of everybody, they need to do that on a final release. But what you can do is you can be very agile up front in researching, development, and prototyping, and running tests and running trials. But then you have to switch over to the full sort of certification regulation element. So we ended up with a hybrid approach there. The front end was very agile. The back end was very predictive. I also worked with some military contractors doing software development for drones that were used in a military environment, right? And super highly regulated, very hard to become a contractor in that space for security reasons. A lot of upfront due diligence around, make sure that these aren't bad people wanting to bid on the software. And then there's a lot of independent third-party oversight. So you've got a software development team, and there is another team that all that they're doing is auditing the code and making sure it's secure and things. So a lot of rigor. But we've been successful in using short iterations and exposing risks, doing the risky bits early, getting feedback. That one was really difficult. It was the first time I worked with teams where the actual requirements were security clearance themselves. So it would say, take this field, and which is this long, and display it up here. But it wouldn't tell you that that's speed or direction, or because that's like a need to know basis. So the specifications were weird. It just said, a field of this length, of this, it's an integer, and it's put it up here. And anyway, so even in highly regulated environments, yes, you can be successful. Now, you might say that what we implemented was like a hybrid because we had agile bits in it, but we surrounded it with a whole bunch of regulation and supporting stuff. So I don't think there's environments where it doesn't work. There's certainly environments where it makes a lot more sense. Anything that's uncertain, anything, and whether that's requirements uncertainty or technical uncertainty, iteration is a great way to flesh that out, right? And then there are periods or instances where you just need to plan it, right, and communicate it. And perhaps a more predictive approach is the way that you do that. And again, I want to be successful. I want my teams to be successful. If we use Agile here and a predictive over there, great. I really don't care. I used to say if wearing purple hats got us better results, I would ditch Agile and wear purple hats, right? And purple hats never became a thing, but I think AI is perhaps the new purple hat, right? In that it might be what moves us forward, right? As a personal accelerator, everybody will be using iterative incremental approach and be backed up, having some of our work assisted by AI tools. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a lot of questions from AI actually. You mentioned AI, like the first one I have, and many times people ask, like more of a agile professional, is agile at risk of becoming irrelevant. Normally, people ask the project entire. I'm sure you were at PMI conference where I was not able to join. I have to go to Dubai. This question must have comes up.
Yeah,
First of all, agile project managers and then other general project manager, are they becoming irrelevant in the age of AI? Because AI can manage most of the jobs without them. If not, how it is linked into it? I want to go a little bit more in that
sure.
question.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think so. Agile used to be talked about a lot, right, in the PMI space, in the project management space, because it was the new thing. And we're not talking about Agile anymore. We're talking about AI because it's the new shiny thing, right? And it's I think, probably, very impactful, potentially more impactful. However, if you think about how do you implement AI, well, you've got to try it out, right? And where it works, great. Where it hallucinates or has bias or is just agreeing with you but not helping, well, then you have to move away from that. And that sounds pretty agile to me in that we try it, we evaluate it, we get feedback on it, and then we either profit from it or we pivot. So it's funny. Yes, we're talking less about agile, but how we adopt any new technology has to be a very agile way, right? Um, so I don't think, this kind of gets into the little bit that is agile dead sort of argument. Um, I think perhaps agile coaching might be greatly diminished, if not, killed off. We won't be talking about it as much, but it's not because it's not valuable. It's because it won. It became the default way of doing anything with uncertainty. It's baked into how we do stuff. We expect to pilot. We expect to be consulted. We, expect that, hey, if this doesn't work, we'll learn from it and we'll move on. So Agile's not going away. I think for the knowledge work, anything new that we're doing, it's the default way of doing stuff. Will AI, kind of the other part of your question, will AI replace project managers? That's a more interesting question, right? I had a session at the Global Summit conference, and it was all about using AI in teams. What we looked at was we generated a project plan using ChatGPT. So I gave it very little detail, said, hey, develop this project plan. And it didn't say, well, that's impossible to develop a project plan from that scant information you just gave me. It happily created a project plan, and said, oh, in week 5, we'll be doing security. In week 7 and 8, we'll be building features. And the downside of that is if you don't engage the team, then there's no buy-in from the team. They're not going to get excited about trying to execute on a plan that we develop using AI. And so my session was, how do we still engage the team but use AI, where it makes sense? So it's kind of human first, the people that are designing the work. So we get the customer, the sponsor, and the team. We figure out what is it we want to build, and then we use AI to help us get there faster, right? So currently, that seems the sweet spot is that we still have people in charge, we get their buy-in and agreement first, and then we use AI as an accelerator. But I was kind of in the minority at that conference. There was a lot of people saying, well, you can generate user stories with AI, and then you could generate acceptance criteria with AI, and then you could generate a backlog with AI and put all these things in. And why do that if you can just vibe code an entire, we've got some disconnects if you're trying to automate human steps when there's no human there. Do you know what I mean? So we haven't figured out well, maybe some people have, but it's not widely communicated, right? Which things you should do with AI. And if it's really just to make one process faster, but the team consuming that is using AI to do that, what value are we kind of adding? There's this, I was reading yesterday about this technique or this phenomenon. I made a note of it. Oh, that's right, monitoring fatigue. And it's like people that are having to review a lot of stuff that's been written by AI or checking that in fact it's not containing bias or omissions or hallucinations. They're kind of questioning, is my work really better if now I'm just checking the outputs of AI and people are sending me stuff saying, hey, Mike, here, I've done this, and now I've got to check it. You've got that monitoring fatigue. It is super interesting time. They'll be talking about this period in the future when we're trying to figure out how best to use AI. It's not going to replace our project management jobs, in the this year. I don't know when. Actually, I shouldn't really say that. There's only 2 weeks left of this year. I don't think it'll replace them next year either. But it's certainly an accelerator. I'm using it more and more in my work to help out with things. And I'm sure everybody else is too. But currently, teams and projects are thought up by people, right? People sponsor these projects, right? And what we build gets used by people. And a lot of the building is done by people. They might be using AI tools, but it's kind of people all the way down at the moment. And so I think as long as there are a lot of people in the loop, project managers will be required. And
Yeah.
we might call them product managers. And again, one of those things, purple hats. I don't care if you call me a project manager, a product manager. I'm just trying to deliver some value, some valuable outcome to
Mhm.
you. So our roles may change names, but I think as long as we're striving, we're gathering a bunch of people together to try and build something that's not been done before, whether that's a project or a product. I think there's a role for project managers, and especially the technical savvy ones that can use these tools effectively. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Sorry, very long answer and a bit of a
No,
rant.
that is very important because this is one of the most hot discussion that is going on. I'm very active on social, and whenever we go to project manager, is PMP is going to that? Is the project
Mm,
manager? It gets like you can see it's a leader like clickbait. You get a lot of information
yeah.
from. But what I am hearing from you, and you can correct me, with AI. I tried actually I wrote it down here with AI. As we move more and more towards what CPI MS says singularity, maybe as we move more towards that, emotional intelligence and those communication skills for project managers, they will become more important because if you are doing things and you are not getting buy-in, it will become more challenging there, right?
Exactly. Yes, and that was the point of my Global Summit presentation in Phoenix a few weeks ago, was that if we don't have buy-in, you get a bit of a shrug plan, right? Nobody's committed to it. Nobody really cares. And then we have a lack of attention to results and outcomes, and things fall apart, can fall apart pretty quickly, right? And that's why I really like to co-create the vision of where we're trying to get to with the sponsor, with the team present, so they can see why it's important to the business, right? So yeah, I think there's value still in having those kickoff meetings with people and finding out what that vision is, and then asking the team, cool, you know, we know what we've been asked to build. How do you think we should approach that? And having those steps before you engage AI to say, generate me a project plan for delivering on this vision, right?
Mm. Yeah, a very interesting question by Sudha. Now, I know you cannot predict future, neither you, neither I. But considering this AI, considering the way how things are moving, do you think these certifications will have more value in the future, especially in North America, right? The rest of the world still is gonna catch up in 5 to 10 years. Will it this certification will give more value because people with the certification for last 2 decades they have received very good jobs, but with the AI, do you think now the experience or now the command in AI will take precedence over it?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because there's two things happening. We're seeing the first impacts of AI as a productivity booster within the IT industry first. And so there have been a lot of high profile, large number layoffs at some of the big players, Microsoft and Google saying a certain percentage of their code now is AI generated. They need less developers, right? So will there be as many tech jobs out there? And then I think that will ripple to other industries, right? It will happen in, auditing, it will happen in accounting, it will happen in legal, but we're seeing it first in IT. So do sort of certifications still matter? Well, you know what? PMI has been smart about being one of the leaders in pushing AI into project management. So that was one of the things I listed as the addition to the ACP, right? We added AI coverage, and it's one of the things that's the big differentiator for the new PMP coming out in July of 2026. Is they've added, and it's very interesting, they've added AI and sustainability because they kind of go hand in hand, right? So AI, it can do a lot. So if you're a project manager that gets the new PMP, the one that's exposed now in the pilot or will be coming in July of 2026, it basically says, hey, I'm a project manager that understands project management, and I understand AI in the project management space too. So, there's that old quote, AI won't take your job, but somebody who understands AI better than you do
Yeah,
might take your job, right?
I take it,
So it's that, I think that's why we're updating these credentials, or PMI is updating these credentials to add things like AI and also sustainability, because AI is actually, extremely high cost in terms of its electrical use, water use, sort of general energy consumption, right? So we need to be aware of the impacts of that. And so adding sustainability was an interesting sort of pairing with AI to talk about, well, there's more than just profit. What about our social impact? What about our environmental impact and things?
yeah. So do
Yeah,
you recommend under these things, like the current PMPs or the current certified people, those who have done from like all 1.6 million people, they should go towards the new shining certification, CPM AI. Have you checked that content? I was checking the
I have.
content. Yeah,
Yeah,
because just the basic or the foundation of what AI is, the data structure,
exactly.
things
Yeah,
of that. It does not teach you how to use the AI. Like, but I was looking at the content, and one of the student asked me, I said, it's a good certification. Certifications are good to have. But my point is that you do not learn how to use AI with that.
yes.
You just learn behind the scene what is happening in the data collection, data refining. So what are your thoughts about CPM AI?
Yeah, I think it's a good understanding. Like you say, it's background, right? Um, so it's like the eye test for your driver's license, not really certifying you to use it, but at least it makes, it's one more check that you understand what's happening in the background. Um, so I think this is really where we're going to see a bit of a increase in certifications as people try to differentiate themselves and explain that, hey, I'm a project manager, or yes, I'm a agile lead, but you know what, I also can apply AI well. I'm savvy in that, I'm effective at it. It's super hard to create anything around that because it's evolving so quickly, right? That's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. The way they are evolving, like I was last night, maybe you have used it, Nano Banana, Google has just
Yes.
released it. It was making beautiful images, and like the all the Canva and those things. I was like, that's a good way to look into that. How, and you have to catch up on every single week. Everyone, they are competing with each other, and
Yeah.
Apple has been silent, but I'm sure they will come up with something. And with the very soon the VR and Meta or IN they are releasing, that is going to be a game changer into that. Let's come back to a little bit to PMP certification, the gold standard of certification for last 15 years. I was reading your PMP Illustrated, and you focused a lot on multiple intelligence. That was how your book starts or how the articles work into that. And then you went towards that majority of the people are visual reader, and the entire PMP Illustrated is based on that concept. So many people in today, they don't read books. I do recommend
Right.
everyone. get Mike's book. It's not a book. It's more of a like a comic book when you are like, I got comic book for my children. It's like that. It's more
Yeah,
of a comic
absolutely.
book,
Sure.
beautiful illustrated. So can you walk through us and maybe share something the people how to use that? Because there's a free version available. I was checking, yes, few
Yeah,
days back
if
that.
can
Yeah.
I share my screen and show us that?
Please,
Okay, cool.
please.
So we're talking about a website, and there's a book that accompanies it, and it's called PM Illustrated. So can you see my screen now, Amir? Am I
Yes,
sharing?
yes, yes, I
Okay,
can.
great. So, and there's a couple of things going on. So PM Illustrated is a website I created. So when COVID hit, I was a consultant, had my own consulting company, and my two main clients, one was a hotel and one was an airline. And they were terrible. I thought I was diversified in different industries, but of course, terrible clients to have during COVID because nobody flew and nobody stayed in hotels. So I thought, oh, I'll become an ATP. And so I got my materials, and they were very text heavy. And I've always been a visual learner myself. So I set out to create the training materials that I wish I was consuming. And so I created PM Illustrated. And what we're seeing here is the exam content outline. So the current PMP exam is spread across three domains: people, process, and business environment. And then there's these different tasks like managing conflict. And then within a task, we have these enablers, which are illustrative sort of things that a project manager needs to demonstrate how to do. So we've got like provide training for our team, collaborating with stakeholders. And there's this allows you to click and sort of chart your own adventure through your whole PMP learning experience. So if I was to click on manage conflict now, it would take us to the content here. We could read about this, we could watch a little video or listen to an audio, because most people are visual learners, and it's not many people pick up a full textbook these days, and they would rather sort of say, okay, yeah, I need to understand 5 levels of conflict, and why, in fact, conflict can be healthy, because without good conflict, then we never really build commitment for something if we don't have a chance to argue our case, right? And so we understand, well, what's the difference between good conflict and bad conflict? And how do we sort of respond to these different levels? So it walks us through with lots of visuals and explains some of the things that are in the exam, like the dual concern grid. And then at the end of each section, there's a little quiz, and you answer the quiz. And if you get it correct, then you earn a badge. And so it's kind of gamified, and you can check where you're up to by clicking on My Achievements. And for this particular user, they've just earned, I think, a couple of badges. Yeah, so they've earned the Manage Conflict and Lead a Team. And then if they decide, you know what, I want to go over to Process, Manage Risks, and take me to that quiz. And I would just want to challenge this, see if I know about risk management already. And so it would take us to the quiz for risks. But the idea is that you can chart your own adventure through the PMP study experience, and you use those badges to track, what you've demonstrated your understanding around. But it's based on the current exam content outline, which is divided into these business environment, people, and process. And that's how many questions you typically get in each category within the current 3.5-hour exam. And it emphasizes this isn't a test of the PMBOK guide. PMBOK's just one source. There's lots of different sources. And as we talked about before, it's from highly predictive all the way across to Agile. And throughout the book, we use these kind of characters, animals, like a cart horse for predictive, a gazelle for agile, fast moving, and hybrid is kind of somewhere in between, like a horse, a zebra, somewhere in between. And there are different sort of types of hybrid. It could be almost agile, or it could be almost fully predictive. So we talk about the current exam, and then the exam is changing. So happening next year is an update to this. And so the ECO has changed again because they did a bunch of surveys, a job task analysis study, and they asked people what's important. And they said artificial intelligence and sustainability is important. And so these weightings are changing. There's a lot more on the business environment, and they're introducing new question types. So these are the domains that are shifting over here. We've got artificial intelligence, we've got sustainability in here as well. And instead of it being 50-50, predictive and agile and hybrid, it's actually now going to be 60% agile and hybrid, because that's what their studies and analysis actually showed, and only 40% predictive. So there's a even bigger skew towards hybrid and agile approaches. And we got some changes happening to the format. So it used to be 230 minutes or just under 4 hours, and now it's going to 4 hours, so 240, an extra 5 questions in the exam. And you used to get two 10-minute breaks, and now you only get two 5-minute breaks. So a little bit different there.
These
I think
breaks
there'll be
doesn't make
pushback
sense to
on
me.
this.
Like they could make one break of 10 minutes instead of giving five. Like let's say you are
Yeah,
giving in center, you go to toilet, like 5 minutes goes like
you,
that.
you
That
got
does
to
not
pee
make
really
sense.
quickly now. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. I think that, like I say, that there might be pushback on that. And the eligibility criteria has changed a little bit. You can now look back 10 years for project experience, so that's good. And there are some slight differences in here. And there's also a pilot that's happening as well. So opening now, uh, you can take the new exam in January if you want to. And I'm actually offering a free study group for anyone that wants to go do that. I'll be sharing new content around the AI, things that'll be in the exam based on the exam content outline and sustainability. And I'll also be providing mappings, because it seems like a lot of content, the domains seem different, and there's all this business environment stuff now, but it's really just a moving around. All of the risk
Yeah.
management and change management that used to be in process has now
Process.
moved to business environment, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if people are studying already and they feel like, oh, I'm kind of committed to the current one, it's not a big deal. We can teach you about AI and sustainability, and then there'll be less of the other stuff kind of in there. And so I've been producing these kind of mappings about, what's been elevated, what's been consolidated, what's expanded, what's refined, what's retired. So engaging and supporting virtual teams is just assumed now, right, in terms of how you operate and run projects. And we don't talk about emotional intelligence as a separate topic because it's baked into the leadership and setting a vision and all those good things. So different ways to show how the content is moving. And yeah, I'll be running a support group for anyone that's actually signs up to take this pilot. And I also kind of new today is that I'll be doing like 3 1-hour Zoom sessions during January for anyone that wants to take the pilot and join the study group.
Sure.
So yeah, just a little bit more about why visual learning these days, because it's how we consume information. If we want to
Mhm.
know how to fix a leaky tap, I'm going to go to YouTube more than I am to, a DIY book. And if you just look at when you see something like this, quite often we're drawn to the right-hand side, support diversity and inclusion, be a servant leader, and inspire and motivate your teams. It's just a much easier way to consume information than reading through text. And by building maps of content and allowing people to explore in their own sequence, in their own order, it's a more natural way of consuming information. And most of the information that enters our brains, if it's visual, it's a lot stickier. And some things are just easier to explain if you show them working. A little animation about a Kanban board of how work moves across it is probably makes a lot more sense to people than trying to explain that in text. So sometimes the best way to explain something is with a visual. And we found that research has found that if you can add images to your ideas, then they become a lot stickier, right? We retain a lot more of that. And so for visual learners who are studying for the PMP exam, that's what this website and the PM Illustrated book are really targeted at. And why animals? I get asked, hey, Mike, why are you using cartoon animals? And does this come with crayons or did you eat them already? And it does seem very juvenile, right? But if you have read any neuroscience books like Made to Stick, it explains how we remember things that are simple, unexpected, and emotional. And using animal cartoons, I found as a way of making them sticky, right? They're simple, they're unexpected, but animals have emotion, or we attach emotions to animals, right? The big cart horse, we know he's could be slow, but he's steady and he's strong. And our, 500 item work breakdown structure is solid and reliable. And so we can use a cart horse to talk about a predictive approach. We can understand that becoming the bridge to success for others really embodies what servant leadership is about. So animals convey emotion. We attach emotion. We know that gazelles are light and agile and fast, but they're skittish and you can't predict where they're going to go, right? So we use animals. I use humor because it makes things more memorable. And really, it's about how do we spend less time studying so that we're successful. And if anyone signs up for the site, half the site is free. But if you sign up and use it, then 10% of those proceeds go to the World Wildlife Fund. So yeah, it's a bit of a labor of love. It was really, how would I like to teach project management as a visual learner myself? Anyone's welcome to come and use it and try the quizzes and earn the badges. You'll see from this launch pane that some of these have padlocks on, and these are the ones you need a membership for. And it's like $30 for 3 months. It's not a super expensive. It's like half the price of study hall. And there are different ways of navigating the content. So here we're looking at the exam content outline, people, process, business environment. But some people prefer more of a sequential way of kicking off a project, starting the project, planning the work, leading a team, supporting it. They take you to exactly the same modules. So if I can find that conflict management one that we started off with, here it is. So this is exactly the same module. If you were to click on this, it would take you to the same manage conflict one. There's just different ways of grouping. You just find one that makes sense to you. If you're interested in building teams, starting the project, staying on track, or if you just want to click through everything that's in there, doesn't matter. It's just a way of navigating that. And so for the we looked at the new exam that's coming out and the pilot. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
this was a project I started before joining PMI, and they very kindly allowed me to continue it, and so I'm able to do that.
Yeah. So you will be sharing, like, I have your old book, and you see, I'll tell you one thing. I, when I was in Dubai, I contacted you. I read the entire website. I messaged you that where can I get this book, because it is not available in Amazon, Dubai. So when I came to US, that was the first book I ordered, the hard copy.
The the
Yeah,
PM
yeah,
Illustrated.
yeah,
Oh, you
yeah.
got the hard copy one. Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, that big. Like when it came, it was like my kids always take my books. Why it is heavy? Then they started looking at it. It looks like a kid's book. Yes, I said it's a kid. It's
Yeah,
like it's
it does.
that. Yeah, it's a good book. So you will be also updating your new book according to
Yes.
new exam
Yeah.
content outline.
Exactly. So it's a bit tricky, right? Because a lot of people are still using the current exam content outline, but switching over next year. So I'm writing the new content and I'm moving it to the new structure. It's probably going to
Mhm.
be available, I'm going to guess, around about March next year, so that people can use it to study for the exam in September, in July, I mean. So that's the plan. And the website will kind of have two versions, right? When you go into it, maybe I'll have another one here that says 2026 ECO or something like that. and you'll be able to flip. So if you're studying for the current one, you use this. If you want to study for the new one, you'd kind of click over here. And then when the exam cuts over, I'll retire this view and then everyone will get the
I got
new
it. Yeah, that
view.
makes that
Yeah,
makes more sense. Okay, Mike, from when we go to the content that you have, like it's a beautiful content, you understand the entire content, and the content is clear to everybody. Like I specialize especially for those people who have failed in the exam. Like my 70 to 80% students are those people who have failed in the exam. They have gone through a lot of content. They have gone through, like today, four people reached me out at LinkedIn that they failed in the exam and I have a product for them. So do you recommend also, like, are you working with PMI? Because study hall is not enough. It is either very difficult language. If you have you checked study hall?
I have. And we
Yeah.
need to, yes, yeah. And I've got to be careful because I also work for PMI, right?
Okay.
So
Okay. So
I have seen study hall, and I follow some of the Reddit discussion threads as well, where people post a question and say why A or whatever, right? So it's getting improved.
mhm,
The PMI is aware of some of the questions. The language is a bit weird, and they're making improvements to it, right?
mhm. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
As of now, apart from PMI, do you have any other recommendation for simulator? Because I have my own 5,000 questions. Of course, we get study hall at the PMI ATP. I get them
Yes.
some of the time to my students. Any other recommendation? Because you used to work with RMC when like
Yep.
were they used to be very good at the simulator. I had that simulator when I did my PMP, right?
Sure.
So, do you think
I
their
do.
simulator is all still good?
Yes, the RMC, the Peterson simulator is still good. I have my own now on PM Illustrator. If you let me share my screen again,
Yeah.
I can
Sure.
show you that. If you go to study aids, there's a practice exam. This one's totally free. This next one is for members. But what's nice about it is it gives you this results radar. So here, the questions are all randomized, of course, but
Mm.
they're all tagged with which exam content outline, task, and enabler they refer to. So for this, like fictitious results, we scored really poorly in support team, right? And also in plan and manage procurement. So I would recommend people that perhaps have struggled, maybe failed the exam, come in and try one or two of these results radar quizzes, because it will pinpoint if there is a particular domain or topic that you're weak on, right? Or maybe you're strong on process but weak on people, or something like that. You will be able to get a nice graphical view to see where your pain points are. And then, because you know what, if you're strong on managing risk or engaging stakeholders, don't study that anymore, right? Focus on where your weaknesses are. And so, yeah, I think something like this might be helpful.
Yeah.
This one's free, so give it a
Yeah.
try, and if it's helpful, great. And if
You
it's
can
not,
we can even collaborate for the students, like we discussed in past. Like I can buy that at the bulk and I can share with the students per person. We can look
yeah,
into that.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because I'm always looking. I still remember what I used to say for ACP student: read the mic books 2 times. There is a like 100 question, and then there is, if you buy a book, you get a one mock also. If I remember, if
right.
I'm not, like in the first pages, do that and you clear the exam. So yeah, that used to be for PMI SAP, and I'm
Sure.
sure with the new, it will be looking into that.
Yeah.
Mike, you went to the PIM the new PIM book,
Yes.
and how do you like PIM 7? Is not much useful, right? For the PMP exam. It's good. I loved it.
Right.
From all the books, I loved that one more. But it has nothing to do with the exam. And my majority students are preparing for PMP. They will go through. How would you recommend them for those who will be coming now and before? When they should read book or should they not go for it?
So, sorry, just to make sure I understand the question. Are you asking which version of the PIMBOK they should read for the current exam? And right. So your version looked very different than my version.
No, no.
How
I,
comes
I,
yours is spiral bound? How did you get a
yeah,
spiral bound one?
I got it. I removed it and I get it bounded from there.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
I got the
Right.
bounded from outside. because
Oh, I see. Yeah,
I
okay.
was going through in depth and I need highlighter that damages it. Like the setting
Dedicated
I
reader.
got it,
Yeah, okay.
I damaged the outside. So I went to the shop. I said, "Can you do spiral?" He took the same book, but I said, "Do not damage side." So he made the spiral bound it.
But I think you just printed off your PDF and created one for free.
No,
But
no,
anyway,
no. Yeah.
no, I'm joking. Um, So yes, the eighth edition out now. That's really going to be the target for the updated exam happening in July next year, right? So this talks about sustainability and AI that's in the new exam. The current exam uses the seventh edition as one of the sources, and of course the Agile Practice Guide and other sources are used too. So I think you should be aware of them. You should have access to them. I don't think you need to buy the hard copies and highlight them or anything like that. I recommend that people, as a PMI member, you should have free access to the Agile Practice Guide and the seventh edition. Read through them, understand the concepts. But remember that the CAPM is a more of a recall type test. It will ask you what comes next in the process, but the PMP is aimed at application level. So they give you a scenario and then they say, what should a project manager do? So it's deliberately kind of one level higher on Bloom's taxonomy of understanding, right? That it's really describe a scenario and then ask you as a project manager what you should do. So
Mm.
it's never really going to be a test on, what is the tool and technique for this activity. And a lot of people spend too much time memorizing, and especially now that we've reintroduced ITTOs, inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs in the eighth edition, they're back. I don't recommend people go memorize those. You really need to understand how to solve a problem that's posted to you. So yeah, these study guides and PMBOK guides are useful. We don't want to be blindsided by a topic that we've never studied before, but at the same time, it's never going to be a test on what comes next or what does the book say about X or Y. So instead, I think learn the concepts and practice answering questions in the right amount of time, and that's probably the best way to prepare for the exams.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. You have been generous, and we are running out of time. But I would like to
Of
do
course.
maybe one another session. Maybe once you release your new PMP illustrated, and I get my hands on it. I would love to.
Sure.
I would love to have that because I love reading books. For everybody who will later on watch this video and they are visual reader, it's very good for you. You just go to the PMI, the PMP, PMIillustrated.com, just put in the chat box, go to the study guide. You can go for the practice exam, right? A lot of the things are free here. A lot of the things are there. Like the first 105 questions are free. Try for it, get a sample. And I would recommend you get a membership. Like, and the membership is very inexpensive. Like if even if you get for a 1 month, it's $15. And maybe we can ask for Mike, for many people want to get for 3 months. If we can also get some coupon later on, Mike can share with us.
Sure.
I
Yeah,
will
let's
share.
do a discount code
Yeah,
for everybody that watches this webinar. I'd be
yeah,
very happy to do
yeah,
that.
that will be amazing. Get it, try with it, and I'm sure you would love it because this was like I read every single thing that is available on project management, and I read his exam content outline somewhat sequential 3 times to make sure I also understand it and I have used it material. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for your time. It has been an honor to record you, and you are one of our gurus, I would say, for all of us. We follow you a lot with all the content, and I see you put the PMP illustrated picture on your wall just to keep
Right.
reminding.
Yeah.
It has been awesome with you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for
You're
the
very
chance.
welcome. Thanks for having me. Bye.